We're in the final session of Fibs and 4, and you've really done some great work. I want to congratulate you. That last session was 11 videos long with lots of examples and homework, and if you've made it this far, you're doing really well. This session's going to be a little bit lighter. We're going to talk specifically about time forecasting, and I wanted to just drop that into Fibs and 4. I do a much larger teaching of this in total Fibonacci trading, but this is going to be enough to give you just a simple tool and kind of expand your awareness to this idea of time. Most traders don't even think of what I call the x-axis, and it's somewhat ironic because it's 50% of your chart. If you think of price being the vertical axis and time being the horizontal axis, well, that represents half of the information that you have on your chart, but most traders don't even look at it. And so essentially what they're doing is tying one hand behind their back and trying to go out and navigate these markets. And I think that's foolish. So I wanted to give you this time segment so that you could at least be aware of it. And if you want to explore it further, jump into total Fibonacci trading, and there's a whole longer teaching and a couple other tools that I give you in there. And then lastly, I want to put it all together and give you some tips and tricks to integrate Fibonacci analysis with your personal trading plan, because really, unless this has a home and it's intentionally integrated, all of this hard work was for naught. And you might have some interesting party tricks you can do at a technical analysis society, but I could care less about that. I want to make sure that you're using these tools to put cash in your jeans. That's the only reason to layer on new analysis. And so I want to make sure that you're prepared and ready to do that. So let's go ahead and jump on into our time forecasting. And this, like I said, is a little overview. And the reason it's important, as I mentioned previously, is typically traders are focused on the Y, or the price axis, but there's this entirely separate axis that we can analyze called time. Now, this is important here. By itself, time cannot accurately trigger a trade setup. Underline that in your notebooks. This is not meant to be used in a vacuum. However, when it's used together with other analysis, it becomes a very powerful tool. And what I need you to understand is that many of the principles that you've been learning in price analysis will also apply to time analysis, probably the most significant of which is that the time axis is subject to the same cycle adjustments as your price grid, meaning it's expanding, contracting, or symmetrical. And so we're going to use many of the same tools, especially if you continue your study of time analysis. You'll discover we'll use many of the same tools that we do on the price axis. We just rotate them 90 degrees and use them on time. Now, one of the reasons that time is interesting to me is because of this guy right here, W.D. Gann. I think he had heritage that maybe invented WD-40. I've never seen it on Wikipedia, but I believe it to be true, so therefore it must be. But W.D. Gann has done extensive research on market timing and offers some very interesting study we can do here. Now, you've already worked with some Gannian principles already. In fact, as you were drawing your early Fibonacci ranges and we were learning to put gaps and major moves right at your 50% ratio, that came to us from W.D. Gann. And you also learned that oftentimes it's the secondary testing that's preferable when you're measuring your ranges. And the reason I bring this up is because if you've paused this video and Googled this guy, W.D. Gann, and wanted to figure out a little bit about him, he also has some weird stuff that he came up with too, like learning to time trades based on the phase of the moon. And, well, I think we could actually make an argument for that because it's probably based on some kind of a Fibonacci ratio. It's, I don't need to get into intergalactical stock trading. That's a little far out there, but don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, because this guy really did some profound things in the world of trading. In fact, a guy named James Harzik, if you say it guttural enough, you'll believe that I actually know how to pronounce it. But, my friend James here analyzed a month's worth of Gann's trades, and he discovered that Gann was about 92% accurate. How many of you would enjoy a 92% win-loss ratio out there? And this wasn't just over a couple days of trading. It was over 286 trades. I think he might have been a pattern day trader if he made 286 trades in a month. And he turned $450 into 37 grand. So, just because he got a little bit, intergalactical doesn't mean that we have to disregard all of his contributions that he made to the world of technical analysis. And this is why I bring all of this up. This guy Gann, who went on to later make a huge fortune in the world of trading, had suggested that out of all of his personal analysis, time was of the greatest importance. Now, why would that be? Consider this. Time is the only standard that is true among all of your charts. A second is always going to be a second. A day is always going to be a day. A year is always going to be a year. The time grid never compresses, right? However, price changes all the time. So if you're trading a $1,000 stock, it's going to have much different variations than if you're trading a $10 stock. And so $1 at 1,000 is much different than $1 at 10. You see where I'm going with that? That ratio can change dramatically between underlying securities and across different markets. However, time is always consistent. And Gann said that time for him was the starting points of a lot of his analysis. Now, I don't go there. I think that price is obviously where you need to start. That's what we've worked so hard on. But I think time can be very, very important for you to measure. So here's what we're going to do. There's two specific ways that you can establish your time grid using Fibonacci time extensions and Fibonacci time zones. I'm going to focus today, or in this session, specifically on the Fibonacci time extensions. And if you want to dig further into this world of time, as I've mentioned before, come join me in Total Fibonacci Trading and we'll explore it a little bit more there. So, starting off with Fibonacci time extensions, do you remember that little ABC tool that we use? I call it the 3-click or the ABC tool. Well, if you could imagine that tool where you clicked on A and then you B and you click C and you project it on down. If you could take that whole thing and just rotate it 90 degrees, you have the Fibonacci time extension tool where you're going to go ahead and click the same places, A and B, and click C. But instead of caring about where we retrace to in terms of a support, we're caring more about where we head to in terms of a time forecast. You see the difference? It's the same exact tool that you're used to working with. It's just rotated 90 degrees. So here's going to be your rules for establishing Fibonacci time extensions. First of all, identify the correct candles to be measuring your time extensions. This is going to start with your price measurements. All right, and then following the rules for establishing correct price range drawing, establishing your Fibonacci time or Fibonacci price zones. Confluence, if you can establish it, is very, very beneficial because it tells you that you are choosing the right candles. You're not fudging it, but you had to be very specific in the candles that you chose so that you got confluence to line up. So I would encourage you to use confluence when you're doing time projections. And I want to remind you that this is why you've worked so hard to be specific with your measurements up until this point. Remember we talked about the balance of the creative and the analytical? Well, this is where the analytical side of your mind is going to really, really serve you well because you have very specific measurements on specific candles that now you can project forward to specific times in the future. The second step is to mark the 3 necessary dates. So the ABC tool. A is the beginning of a known time range, B is the end of that known time range, and C is the beginning of the new forecasted time range. And these Fibonacci time zones should be very familiar to you by now. You're going to be using 100%, 1.382, 1.5, 1.618, and you can continue all of these on up to 300%. Now I've learned that after 300%, it usually starts to break down, and it doesn't serve me to go to 400 or 500% time extensions, but all the way up to 300%, you'll be surprised how consistent this time grid stays. So go in here and backfill, and you can do 2.0, 2.382, 2.5, 2.618, all the way on up to 3. Let's take a look at an example here. This is the euro dollar, and we're going to start by figuring out exactly which candles we need to draw from. So we're going to start drawing our ranges, and we've identified the starting spot up here. Now remember, you're using the wicks a little bit more in foreign currency. and we've got a range down here, and range down here, and we've got confluence that's beginning right there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that confluence zone. I'm going to mark the candles and delete the Fibonacci ranges because they're not useful to me anymore, but we do need to hold on to the candles because that's how we're going to begin the time extensions. Then we go ahead and we start our ABC tool. So this candle right here is A, this candle here is B, and that's so that we can measure the time between A and B. And then we're going to start it from our point C projection forward. So let's go ahead and do that. You can see it's laid out on the screen. Here's point AB, and then you've got all of your logical Fibonacci extensions from there. Oops, I misdrew that on your screen. Here's AB. Then you've got that first, that would be 100%, 200%, and then 300% goes off the screen. Now what I like to do, again, like we did with price, is simplify this whole thing by just highlighting the internal ratios, 382, 50%, and 61.8. I like to highlight those with a yellow box and delete everything else because it's just cluttering up my screen, and it helps me get a better idea of exactly, you know, a target to shoot for, and it gives me a little bit of wiggle room on either side if necessary. So we'll go ahead and delete those ranges that we don't need, and now we're left with the particular time extensions here. So let's see how well we did. We've got our Fibonacci price extension now, so we're going to go from confluence all the way back to the beginning of our range. We're going to project it forward, and what I want you to notice is that X marked the spot. We have time and price that come together beautifully. Now, maybe we missed this by just a day or two, but I'm good. We would have had to sit through another month of trading to wait to hit that high. This was the framework right here before we sat through a pretty long reversal. Very, very good. I'm going to mark that with the blue line so you can see specifically how X marked the spot. All right. Now, if we want to get a little bit more nutty and try to identify exactly where this range was, it doesn't mean that our framework broke down. I'm just going to go ahead and remeasure, but go from this new wave here. So now we've got AB. Remember the first one, I'll mark in green, if I can find my green. First one came all the way down to here. Second one, we're going to start from this new wave, project it from the same spot forward. There you have it. It's a very, very good target. Checking our Fibonacci extensions with our ABC tool, clicking A, clicking B, projecting it forward from point C. Again, we've got price, time, and X marks the spot. And we all know what's under an X, treasure, right? X always marks the spot where you go digging for treasure. So either one of those, I'm good. If you went ahead and got out right here, A+. If you got this one right here, A++. I'm really good with either one of those. Now, let's go and apply this to your target chart. We've been building this over the last several sessions. We've done all the work already. All we have to do is go ahead and drop in our Fibonacci time zones to the candles we've already identified and see how that plays out moving forward. So I'm going to get target set up, and I'll see you over there in the next video.